I know the purpose of this conference is to focus on the present, what's cutting edge, and the future, but I'm going to start by taking a quick step back to last year. That's when I participated in a leadership course at J&J, and for those of you who have never been through one of these courses, basically you participate in a series of exercises which seem like pretty harmless entertainment, but when you get through it and start to dissect it, you realize there's a much deeper meaning. So the first exercise we went through was something called Zoom, which sort of gives away what happened during it. But essentially, each of the people in the room, and there were about 40 of us, were given a picture. And we were told we had to assemble the pictures into a sequence without showing the picture to anyone else in the room. As you can imagine, this was somewhat chaotic. It was not helped by the fact that some of the people in the room misinterpreted the directions and thought that it was meant to be a giant game of charades and that they couldn't talk about their pictures either, so they started acting things out. We did eventually get past that, though, and we figured out the sequence. And as you can imagine from the name, it looked something like this. Starting off from a very large scale. Okay, and it looks like this may or may not work. And then zooming into the very fine scale. And of course, the point of the exercise was to draw a parallel to our organization, that what you look at in a high-level vision may look very different from the granular details, that the people in the middle whose job it is to connect that high-level vision with the granular details often have the hardest job, and that it's very difficult to get a large group moving in the same direction. And this was only 40 people. J&J is a much bigger organization. We have 130,000 people across multiple countries. And while I realize that's probably the extreme of what people have to deal with, these sorts of parallels are relevant to many different organizations and to many different situations. So it's all about how do we connect one end of the scale with the other end of the scale. So let's just take a look at even the concept of big data and precision health and the application of artificial intelligence or machine learning to patient health data. On the one hand, I imagine just about everyone in the room would agree with me that this is an exciting area. There's a lot of potential to transform healthcare. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. But on the other hand, when we start digging into what it means to different people, and this was part of a project I was involved in recently, looking at gaps in perception among different stakeholders, you realize that, of course, everybody's perspective on the applications of AI to patient health data depends on where they're sitting, what they're looking at. So if you ask a patient, what are you excited about in terms of all of this data coming out and the applications of artificial intelligence, they'll say, well, I'm interested in how it can help me diagnose my disease and what treatments I should take and whether they're going to work. Whereas, as we heard yesterday, if you're a clinician, the most pressing concern is, how do I deal with all of this extra administrative burden from dealing with electronic health records, from dealing with all of the data that's coming out? And get away from the things, get computers to deal with the things that are keeping me from treating my patients better. So on a high level, everyone agrees, yes, there's a lot of potential to improve everyone's lives. But then once you start drilling down, you realize people are looking at very different pieces of the puzzle, all of which are important. And so we need to think about how we connect those pieces. This is the kind of thing we deal with all of the time as we're thinking about how do we move towards a data-driven organization. And this is not a huge shift for the healthcare industry. We've depended on data for a long time to demonstrate the value you can bring to individuals' lives. But it is a shift that many people are considering, and it's one where it affects the mindset that you bring to tackle challenges. It affects the tools you use and the talent you have to draw upon. And so, on the one hand, again, we have general agreement that data and algorithms and their broad application are going to profoundly change the trajectory of healthcare. And then on the other hand, you have people who are busy They are running experiments. They're analyzing data. They're working on a specific disease. And of course, having to deal with lots of meetings. We all have to do that. And it may be very unclear how you get from those pieces up to that high-level vision. So my roles at J&J have been very much in the middle of this continuum. Up until the end of last year, I was focused on an internal piece. How do we develop solutions to integrate different data modalities for precision health, working across all the therapeutic areas in drug discovery? Then I more recently moved to Johnson & Johnson Innovation, where my role now is to think about the external piece. How do we push towards a data-driven organization through partnering in data sciences, not just in drug discovery, not just in pharmaceuticals, but across all of the areas of significant unmet need? And so this gives me an interesting perspective on that balance between the small scale and the large scale, the balance between the internal and the external, and how we put it all together. And it's pretty clear that it's very hard to keep both of those at the front of your mind at once, right? Everyone is busy. Everyone is dealing with many things locally, and so that's what you focus on. That's what you have to get done. But as ever, we have to balance the short term and the long term, small scale and the large scale. And it's very difficult in this space where there are so many companies working on different pieces of the puzzle, bringing innovation to all the different parts of drug discovery and to all the adjacencies, where I haven't even listed companies there in terms of patient engagement, digital health, diagnostics, and so on. And this is really just a small fraction of the companies working in this space. The landscape is changing all the time. Companies are working across multiple pieces of the space. And of course, you also have pharma companies who are working across almost all of these domains. You have tech companies coming into the space. It's a huge landscape, shifting rapidly. And so it's very hard to keep track of all of the different pieces. And it's even harder to try and put it together into something coherent. So how do we tackle this challenge is the question. Now, as I said before, I think it's a combination of things. It's balancing the small scale, starting small, but thinking big. It's balancing building internally with partnering externally. And I would say that in general, when people talk about creating a data science organization, a data-driven organization, they're generally thinking about that internal piece. So there, in terms of starting small, you might say, okay, well, we have specific data sets we need to generate. We're going to use a specific technology platform. We're focused on a specific disease. But at the same time, we need to build the infrastructure so that the data can flow between all of the different parts of the organization, so that we can get insights across multiple diseases and across multiple technology platforms. We need to build tools which can answer the questions that we're interested in. But we shouldn't be focused on individual, customized, one-off approaches, right? We need to have tools that can work together. We need to have tools which are relevant to multiple questions and that can be used by different types of people, not just data scientists, bioinformaticians, statisticians, but also by biologists and chemists. And in terms of expertise, we don't want to start with just building an enormous data science organization. We may want to recruit key individuals with certain expertise, but then generally focus on educational resources so that the entire organization knows what questions to ask and who they can go to for answers. And they know where they can really get those questions answered in order to generally broaden the level of data science sophistication. And of course, we can't just do this all on our own. So we need to partner externally to take advantage of all of the innovation that's happening in the ecosystem. And when we partner externally, we, of course, want to start with a concrete use case, but we want to think about how all of those use cases fit together, right? We're not just doing one partnership. We're thinking about a coherent landscape. So to give you an example of this, we have a group in Belgium which works very much in the same space that Ron just talked about, repurposing high-throughput imaging assays for drug discovery. And they work very closely with our therapeutic areas. They work on a number of different problems. But they realize they can't do it all themselves. And so they've created a number of different partnerships, including one which was recently announced with Ictos. And they're thinking larger, right? They've started with small use cases, but they're thinking about how can we broaden this? How can we build it up into really driving forward what we do in drug discovery through data? This is the kind of thing that we do at Johnson & Johnson Innovation all of the time. We start with specific use cases, specific questions that we want to form partnerships around, whether it's in our pharmaceutical business or across the other businesses. But we also think about what we can do cross sectors. And when I'm talking about cross sectors, it can include things like health technology, where we're looking at digital and mobile wellness, prevention and interception, and also platforms which span across multiple therapeutic areas. Or it can be in specific disease areas like lung cancer, which is a deadly disease and where we need more holistic solutions, pulling from the different sectors. So these are some examples of collaborations that were set up recently, where they really embody this idea of starting with a specific use case, whether it's around using the Apple Watch to improve atrial fibrillation outcomes, or whether it's around digital surgery for lung cancer, but which have relevance to many other areas of the business, and in particular to the platforms such as data and analytics. The other piece of what we do at Johnson & Johnson Innovation, which is critical, is around providing a partner at every stage. You can think of it as precision partnering for health. We look to find the right partner at the right time and to construct arrangements which are a win for everyone involved. Whether it's working with our incubator facilities, whether it's building collaborations, or even equity investment or acquisitions. So we're looking to explore possibilities all the time. And I just want to finish by encouraging everyone to make those connections, because while we all may be working on one or a few pieces of the puzzle, ultimately we want to bring those all together in order to enable transformative innovation in healthcare. Thank you.